Welcome to another episode of The Horrific Podcast. We're two musicians who used to play in a band together and share a passion for scary movies. Each week we pick a different horror movie and dissect it to figure out what it was trying to accomplish, how well it did, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. If you haven't seen the movie we're talking about, then don't worry. The first half of the episode will be pretty high level and spoiler free, and then we'll play a warning before we start talking about any major plot twists in the ending. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy the episode. So here we are, already on our next to last episode of our mini-series on the Netflix series, The Haunting of Hill House.
Oh, buddy.
This thing is flying by.
It really is. I think it's because we're doing 2 episodes of podcast.
Yeah, and it's also just good. Like, it's keeping my attention a lot. So that, and you have like the anticipation of watching the next one when you finish, and so that helps a lot too. But yeah, so normally on The Horrific, in each episode, we'll do a review of one horror movie, but we decided to change things up for a little while and do a review of the horror series that a lot of people had recommended to us, which is The Haunting of Hill House on Netflix. And this week we'll be talking about episodes 7 and 8. So feel free to go back and listen to our reviews of the previous episodes if you want this to make more sense, or if you're fine with embracing chaos, buckle up and join us.
Let's do this thing, buds.
Yeah, and I guess before we get started, one thing that I have to tell you is that since you mentioned that website that lists all the ghosts in each episode, Sarah has become obsessed with finding them before looking at the site. Yeah. And she's actually getting pretty good at it.
I actually wrote out as a question, like, should I not have mentioned that yet? Because that's what I catch myself doing most of the time, is trying to find the ghosts as well.
Yeah, and she definitely caught one in episode 7 that I completely missed in the basement when Hugh's trying to kill the rats. And she wanted to make sure that I put it in my notes that she got it, and I didn't. So here you go.
Did you guys get both of them, though?
I think so.
There's one when he's leaning forward.
And then the one behind the cops.
Cops with the hand,
So, but anyway, so yeah, I guess with episodes 7 and 8, we're kind of on the same format as episodes 5 and 6, where the first one was super focused on one character, which in this case was Hugh, the dad, and the second was more kind of about the whole family. And I also almost feel silly for talking about how dense episodes 5 and 6 were last week, because now I've seen episodes 7 and 8, and man, that's a lot. Yeah, man, it's just getting thicker and thicker. Yeah, the story and kind of the lines of mystery and everything are just really blowing up at this point. So we got a lot of ground to cover. I'm going to play the spoiler warning, and then we'll get into it.
Yep.
Warning, warning, warning. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. This is your warning. Warning, warning, warning. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. This is your warning. It does not all be enough. Warning, spoilers.
Okay, so here are the episode recaps. Episode 7 was all about Hugh Crane, the dad who has been reunited with the kids for the first time in years for Nell's funeral. This episode jumps around a lot in time. In the 1992 timeline, Hugh and Mr. Dudley, who is one of the caretakers of the house, begin cleaning up after the storm that was shown in episode 6. While doing so, they find extensive water damage in the walls of the house. While trying to hunt down the source of the leak, they discover mold in the walls and start a huge project to clean it up. While doing so, they have time to talk, and Mr. Dudley explains why he and his wife refuse to be in the house after dark. After waking up in the middle of the night to find his wife holding a screwdriver to his throat, Hugh suggests that she leave the house for a few days and visit her sister. Throughout the flashbacks, Hugh hears noises in the walls that he thinks are rats, and eventually he breaks through the brick to try and poison them, but instead he finds an old corpse. You also see clips of Hugh's interview with the police the day after his wife died. In the 2018 timeline, you see that Hugh can see his wife Olivia's ghost pretty much all the time. He attends Nell's funeral and talks to his kids, who are all on edge. At the graveside, Luke sees Nell and Olivia's ghosts and freaks out. Stephen talks him down, and then they all go back to the funeral home. Hugh and Theo encounter a ghost there together. Episode 8 focused more on the whole family and took place mostly in the present. In the 1992 flashbacks, Hugh hires people to help renovate the house and then tells Stephen that he will need help watching the rest of the kids while Olivia is visiting her sister. Stephen finds an old desk and restores it as a gift for his mom to cheer her up before she leaves. He gives it to her and she seems genuinely moved, but then freaks out and punches the mirror on it. Stephen is hurt, and then the mom apologizes. In the present day, a ton happens. Luke steals Shirley's credit card and Theo's car and takes off. At first, everyone thinks he's going to score drugs, but then they get a report from the credit card company that he used the car at a gas station that's on the way to Hill House. Stephen and Hugh take off to investigate and find out that he bought several gas cans and filled them up. They realize that he is planning to burn the house down. Hugh tells Stephen a lot about Hill House and how dangerous it is for the family. Meanwhile, Theo and Shirley also realize Luke is headed back to the house, and they leave to try and find him there. They fight, and then Theo tells Shirley what she felt when she touched Nell's corpse and explains what was going on between her and Kevin in the basement the day before. Finally, Luke arrives at Hill House, pours the gasoline all over, tosses his lighter into it, and then nothing happens. He looks at the top of the staircase and sees his mom standing there. Then a red-headed ghost grabs him from behind. Super intense ending.
Yeah. And we had to stop at that.
Yeah, right? Wasn't that unfair?
Mm-hmm.
This series,
we're doing it to ourselves, so.
It's true. We're doing it for the listeners. You're welcome.
You're welcome, jerks.
So, did you learn anything about the series or these episodes?
Yeah, so what I ended up doing this time around, because they're getting kind of thin as far as interesting facts, this time around I did more so facts about the book, like the novel.
Oh, okay.
Which was good and bad, because I think I read like a spoiler that I didn't want to read yet. Mm-hmm. But I won't say it because I get respect.
Good.
For the viewers. Not you. I'll tell you after. Back in 1963, screenwriter Nick Nelson Gidding adapted the novel into the screenplay for the film The Haunting, which was the movie that we're going to be watching after this series. Yeah,
that's also based on the book.
Yeah. It has Julie Harris, Claire Bloom, and it's directed by Robert Wise. That really has nothing to do with this, but in the early 1990s, Stephen King pitched a remake of The Haunting of Hill House to Steven Spielberg under the name Rose Red.
Oh.
A complete script was written, but Steven Spielberg wanted more action scenes, while King argued for more horror. After they mutually agreed to put the project on hold, King bought back the rights to the producer, Mark Carliner. Anyway, it eventually aired as a miniseries called Rose Red in 2002.
Okay, so we may need to check that out too.
Yeah. And then also, in 1999, I guess this is out of order, 1999, the story was adapted again into another film of the same name. Renowned horror director Wes Craven started to work on the project, but eventually left. The final version of the film starred Liam Neeson, Catherine Zeta-Jones, and directed by John DeBont.
That sounds promising.
Yeah. So we'll just have to check them all out.
Yeah.
Starting with The Haunting.
Yep. Agreed.
So, the book was actually inspired by a real-life paranormal investigator. Jackson was inspired to write the novel after reading about a group of 19th century psychic researchers who rented a house they believed to be haunted in order to study the paranormal phenomenon. I won't get too in depth with it because it gives out a little bit of information I want to tell. But anyways, it's inspired by a group of actual people. Apparently, this one I thought was really interesting. Shirley Jackson had a terrifying sleepwalking experience while writing the novel.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to read this one word for word because I thought it was kind of interesting. Early on in the writing process, Jackson awoke one morning to find something terrifying on top of her writing desk, a note with the words, "Dead, dead," scrawled upon it, written in her own handwriting. Jackson, who loved ghost stories but did not believe in ghosts, brushed the strange discovery off as sleepwalking. In Experience in Fiction, she wrote that she used the strange note to motivate her, explaining, I decided that I'd better write the book awake, which I got to work and did. So I just thought it was kind of creepy.
Yeah.
Even if she did sleepwalk, super strange that she wrote dead on a note.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
This was the last one I have. Jackson's husband was actually too afraid to read it. Jackson's husband, Stanley Edgar Hyman, was a well-known literary critic and professor who enthusiastically read all of his wife's books, but not The Haunting of Hill House. According to Franklin, for the first time, he refused to read her manuscript. He found the concept of ghosts too frightening.
That's interesting. I thought you were going to say he was too afraid to read it because he thought it might not be good.
Yeah.
And then he'd have an awkward moment with his wife. But
yeah.
But yeah, well, that's cool.
Yeah, some fun facts.
Yeah.
About OG book.
Well, and this book must have been pretty good if it has spawned this much media after all these years. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for real.
So I'm very interested to read it, and I may do that. Right now I'm reading Pet Sematary because I'm excited about the movie, but yeah. So.
Yeah, and I read somewhere that it was talking about Stephen King and like his love for this book like was just insane. Like he just fell in love with it, which I mean he tried to turn it into a mini series, but still, yeah.
Cool. So let's get into these episodes.
Let's do it.
So episode 7 was called Eulogy, and this is the one that focused on Hugh Crane, who is the dad. And one of the first things that stood out to me, from like early on in this episode, goes back to something we talked about. I can't remember if it was the last episode or the one before, where we were talking about, if we thought the mom's ghost was like always there with him, and if that's who he was always talking to, or what exactly. This one made it really obvious that the answer is yes.
Yeah.
So basically, he sees Olivia's ghost with him at all times.
Yeah,
and I wonder, like an open dialogue with her.
Yeah, where it's almost like she's the voice of reason, but yes. I wonder if she's a ghost or if she's a figment of his imagination. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's just a question I have for it. It's like,
yeah,
because if she's a ghost, then why couldn't she, go back to her kids and say, hey,
right? Well, and like, why does she look different when he sees her than like when you see her in the ghost form that the kids see? But that could have to do with like different relationships between them, or it could have something to do with what went down that night, or so there's still mystery around it. But the main thing was I really liked that. I felt like this episode, as much of any of the others, played up like you seeing things from the perspective of the character it was focused on, because there was a lot of like he would hear her say something and then either be like, oh yeah, that's a good point, I shouldn't do that, or he would like press on anyway even though she was telling him not to, and then something bad would happen.
Right.
And then also towards the very end, there was a scene where he's like telling the police one thing, but then you see that he was actually doing something else in the flashback of it happening, like regarding going into the Red Room. So I really liked that. I really liked that. I felt like you were getting a very, very inside look at his perspective on all the events, which was really unique from that of the kids and everybody else involved. And so I just thought, sort of from a directing and way they pulled it off aspect, that was really cool. Yeah, I think I also think bringing the mom back into it helps her character, as in like before you were kind of thinking, or if there was something else into the mix, because before you were kind of thinking that she went crazy, and now it's like, well, actually what actually happened that night? Did the dad go crazy, or so it was a good move all around for them. Yeah, it definitely seems like they have like a very positive relationship.
Yeah.
So that I think is interesting. An interesting wrinkle too, because had he killed her, which is certainly one of the suspicions at this point, that probably wouldn't be the case. But had she, gone psycho and tried to kill him, that probably also wouldn't be the case. So it just adds to the mystery. But this episode also had a lot of footage of, speaking of adding to mysteries, Hugh's interview with the police.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was really interesting because that was more like direct conversation about what happened that night.
Right.
And I feel like we'd been so thirsty for that information because they'd been just kind of dancing around it. And I thought it was really interesting how the cop kept trying to, it almost felt like trying to give him an out. It's like, just say the thing we want to hear, and then we'll tie all this up and not think about it anymore. But Hugh was really sticking to his story that he didn't kill the wife, but that she also didn't kill herself. And he keeps saying that the house did it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the cop adds at the end, you said you thought she went out of town, but she didn't. Shirley woke you up because she was surprised to see her mom in the kitchen. She said you ran upstairs to the red room. So that's like a bunch of information.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the most straightforward it's been about what happened that night. And so in other parts of the episode, they talk about the mom leaving town, but apparently that didn't happen. But the dad said she did for some reason. So there's still a lot of mystery there, but I feel like we're getting closer to it. And I feel like I'm getting much more optimistic that it will actually get answered in the last 2 episodes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think it absolutely will. They have to. If not, I'm canceling my Netflix subscription. I'm out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, like, because I kind of interpreted the conversation with the cops, like, where the cop was basically saying, like, look, man, what you're saying doesn't make sense at all. We know that you're guilty of killing her, like, almost like in a tricking, like, trying to, not tricking, but, yeah, I guess kind of in a, tricking type manner. And trying to get him just to admit it, and then he's obviously not going to get to go home. Like, I've watched enough police interviews to know this.
Yeah.
So it was like, stick to your guns, man. There you go. You didn't do it, you didn't do it.
Yeah. A question I have for you.
Yeah.
The dad seemed really negative towards Aunt Janet at the funeral.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was weird because she'd been the one to, like, pick up the kids and, fly in and take care of them.
Right.
When he was talking to the police, and then it sounded like she did a lot of like raising them afterwards.
Mm-hmm. So
I would think he'd be more grateful, but it seemed like he had a really negative reaction towards her. Do you have any like theories on why that would be?
So at the beginning of the episode, or beginning of the series, doesn't Hugh have an interview with like a lawyer, and they're talking about taking the kids away from him, and like how it doesn't seem legit, like it may have been the first episode, but so I wondered if like Aunt Janet was like trying to take them.
Oh, okay,
custody.
I got you. Yeah,
take custody away from him, or like maybe he ended up going to jail for it. I don't know, but maybe he ended up going to jail or something for it. Yeah. And while he was in jail, took care of him, and she didn't help the situation or something like that. But that's just my guess.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see maybe like I could definitely see her being antagonistic towards him because of the way that things had played out, and with her, maybe being suspicious that he had something to do with Olivia's death. But yeah, I just it struck me because that was a different reaction than what I would have expected between the two of them. And I guess as far as things going on at the gravesite, Luke has one of the more supernatural experiences that are happening in the 2018 timeline there, when he sees Nell's ghost and then also the mom's ghost, and she starts pulling him down into the grave, and he's like freaking out in broad daylight in front of everybody else there. And then Steven like grabs him and talks him down and says not to give in, and that it's genetic and that they have to keep it together so that they don't end up like the mom and Nell. And I thought that was really interesting because at this point you've just seen the dad walking around talking to his dead wife, and you've seen 2 members of the family at least potentially have killed themselves. And you've seen a lot of supernatural stuff too, but what Steven seems to call into question is like all of that stuff you've kind of seen from the perspective of someone that's in the family. So it's still kind of raising that question of what can you trust and what can't you, who is having real experiences versus who's imagining it, what's real, what's a dream. There's just a lot of complexity still this late in the series that makes it hard to really judge where anything's actually at.
Yeah, because with the funeral scene, it was strange also because like it seems like when Nell first shows up, doesn't she say don't to Luke?
I believe that was as he was tossing the handful of dirt on her, about to toss the handful of dirt on her casket. So I don't know if that was like, don't forget about me, or like, don't bury me, or don't just accept this, or if it was a don't repress, what you know is true. So,
or don't do what you're fixing to do, But so then you have her say that, and then you had the mom try to pull him into the grave. It's just, it was super, super intriguing at that point.
Yeah, and then kind of more at the end of the episode, Theo and Hugh see the dirty footprints in the funeral home, and they follow them, and then they see that Shirley's model home has been destroyed. And as they're bending down looking at it, they both see a ghost crawling towards them. Could you tell which one that was supposed to be?
No, I couldn't tell if that was the mom or if that was Nell.
Either way, it looked like a much like darker, more torn up, like scary version than most of the ghosts we've seen so far.
Yeah, which made me think it could be the mom, just from the vision that Theo had earlier in the series. Yeah. Like where her face looked like it was shot off almost, like halfway. But I don't know who could have done that. My guess is probably the mom, because she also tore up the house, and that was her dream house. So
yeah. Well, and I wondered too because like that black speckled pattern that they found, like that was in the footprints, and then they also saw in some of the pieces of the model, that same pattern comes up in episode 8. So I thought that was interesting, but I still haven't like made the connection back. So that'll be something to watch for in the next 2 as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then I guess the only other things I had in my notes for episode 7 both had to do with the 1992 storyline. And so the dad has been hearing the rats in the wall of the basement all episode. And then finally at the end, he cuts his hand. He's mean to Steven. And then he's kind of like at his wit's end. Stuff's going on with the mom. And he freaks out, and he just uses a crowbar and kind of works his way through the bricks. And he's just going to like poison all these rats. But then once he gets it open, he sees a dead body behind the brick, and it looked like it had a cane, like the ghost that had been following Luke in episode 4. And then the police come and say that he must have bricked himself in there and then had second thoughts because of all the scratches. So that gives you the idea that like he bricked himself in and then tried to scratch his way out, and it was like the ghostly sound that Hugh was hearing the whole episode. And my question for you on that is, do you think, given this example, that all the ghosts in the house are people that died in the house?
I don't know, man. I was wondering that too. I think so. I don't know. I don't want to say all, but I know some of them for sure would have to be, because like you have the old lady who shows up in the room with the like the room that Luke and Nell was playing with, like with the speaker.
Oh yeah.
The thing. So you have her. I mean, you have the same kind of revolving ghosts, but I'm not sure is the honest answer. I would think so, though.
Yeah.
I would think it would have to be.
So I think that's an interesting wrinkle.
Maybe not.
But because of something that I'll come back to later.
Yeah.
So, okay. And then the other piece was like the dad's conversation with Mr. Dudley. I thought that was really interesting because it was the first time that you got like a comprehensive description of how the house works. Right. Of like what the haunting looks like. Yeah. And he talks about how his wife was being haunted by it, and then they refused to come back after dark, and that fixed everything. And so that kind of shows that there is a way out of it, but also that the house really is like malevolent. Like there is something about it that's pulling people in. And he talks about his daughter's miscarriage there in the house and everything else. And so that had me wondering, do you think that maybe Abigail is the ghost of the Dudleys' stillborn daughter?
Yeah, I have that question for you too. I think either, that's the ghost of that child, or Abigail somehow tied into the family, like, into the Crane family somehow. I think it's one way or another. Like, it would make sense that the Dudleys stayed for so long with that crazy stuff going on. Like, I feel like that's the only reason why.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
I also thought it was strange, though, that, like, why would she only be, that old, for so long? But I don't know.
Yeah, I guess you didn't really know, like, how long ago that happened. And then maybe, like, I guess the other ghost didn't really age, so maybe that wouldn't make sense, but I don't know. Anyway, just something I thought would be kind of an interesting twist, because it seems like the Dudleys all of a sudden got a bunch of backstory that they didn't have before, so I'm trying to figure out how that fits into everything, but... I'm
hoping that comes out, for sure. But, I mean, because up until, that conversation with the dad, Mr. Dudley and the dad, that was like, you didn't know anything about them. For all you know, that they could have been ghosts, you know?
Yeah, true. Yeah.
One thing I noticed with episode 7 a lot was at the beginning, it really laid an emphasis on the dad fixing things. Like saying, like, I can fix this, I can fix this. And it seemed like throughout the episode, he was trying to fix the issues that the kids were having. So I wonder how that's going to come into play throughout the, for the last 2 episodes. You know, like, is he, I don't know, what's he going to do to fix the situation that they're in,
Yeah. Well, and I think that had kind of some larger significance just in his confidence in his own ability to fix things, I feel like kept him from acknowledging the problem and getting help sooner. So, like, things were going really wrong with the mom, and he should have looked to get her out of there or to get things figured out way faster. And because it went on so long, I think things escalated. Whereas if he'd been able to just say, I can't fix everything, maybe it would have happened differently. Yeah. And so I think that was kind of like the mini moral of the episode, which I feel like a lot of them have had, which is really cool just from a writing perspective.
Yeah. So, episode 8.
Yeah.
This gave you... I feel like this may have answered the biggest statement that you made about this series so far.
I make a lot of big statements.
Did you see that they actually hired help this episode?
Yeah. Yes, actually. Yeah.
I was like, what are the odds of that happening? We just made a comment at the end of the last podcast about trying to get all this work done, and they hadn't hired anyone.
Or done any work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was funny to me that I brought that up last time, and then immediately in episode 7, they're like down in the basement doing renovations.
Yeah. And then they come out and you have all the people working. But.
Yeah, so things definitely like escalated on that front as they started to see the water damage and realizing that it was going to be a much bigger project than I think they'd originally thought. So,
So, also, I mean, this kind of, Steve is talking throughout the series, and especially like upon like the last couple episodes where he's talking about like it's just a mental illness that the mom has, just the mental illness that Nell had, and that they didn't really see this stuff, and that they're feeding into it, and they shouldn't be feeding them into it. And, it's everyone has it, but then the dad says that point blank, like when he read the book, Stephen's book. He's like, and you talk about, such and such page, walking up the stairs to give your mom this gift, which was the vanity or the desk mirror thing. And he's like, and on your way up, you talk about the clockmaker there, and then went into like a whole spiel about how there really wasn't a clockmaker there. Like that was a ghost.
Yeah,
and that was like.
How he can guarantee it because of like certain things about working on a clock means that only very like specialized people can do it, and it would be very expensive, and he can absolutely guarantee that he didn't hire someone to do that. Yeah. And the way that you tell or can see in clockwork is called witness marks, and that was also the title of the episode. So I thought that was a nice tie-in because that moment to me felt like a very big shift for the series.
And it was also kind of like a big FU to Steven. It was just like, you have. Yeah. You're just refusing to believe that you have.
Well, one thing I always like in a TV show or a movie is when someone kind of gets back in the driver's seat of their own life.
Yeah.
And I feel like Hugh had just kind of been coasting through this whole series. He'd just kind of been the background player. Like, after the stuff that happened in 92, he was always so passive, and he didn't really take much action, and he wasn't really open with people, and he just sort of went with the flow. And I felt like in this episode, as he and Steven are driving back to the house to try and save Luke, he like becomes what he's supposed to be. You know what I mean? Like, it's like he's like, no, you're going to listen now. This is what's going on. I know what's happening, and and there's no arguing with it. This is fact. Let's go and let's do what we need to do. And just seeing that change in his character, I really enjoyed.
Well, and that also brings up, I feel like Steven kind of addressed his concerns with the whole situation too when he's talking about the mom. He said, he starts talking about the night of her death, and he's like, she had a smashed skull, she had bruises on her upper arm, and then when you're gone, she threw herself, or something, like she threw herself off the
balcony,
the balcony, and it was just like
stairs. But
he's like, oh.
Yeah,
so that's what happened.
And he mentioned having seen the police report, which was new information. And so based on that and based on his experience, he thinks the parents got in a fight, and then the dad grabbed her and shoved her against the wall, and then he left with the kids, and then she, in a fit of depression, just jumped off the staircase.
Right.
And I thought that was interesting because that is a completely and totally plausible explanation of what could have gone down. And I think that that's something that Steven had been holding on to his entire life as the explanation for it, and that explains the level of negativity he's had towards Hugh through the whole series. Because before, you were kind of thinking that he held the dad accountable for indulging the mom's mental illness instead of getting help, and then eventually she killed herself. But really, he thinks that the dad was also abusive and like directly involved with the reason she killed herself that night, which to me explains his character and his character's attitude a whole lot better.
Yeah. So it seems like in that drive alone, so in the drive to the house alone, got a lot of answers.
Yes. Yeah.
Like it was roles reversed, like where it's like, okay, let's just get this out there. Mm-hmm. You also kind of find out that Steven's, I think the issue between him and his wife is that she found out that he had a vasectomy, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And then can't have kids, but they were going to like a doctor
to a fertility clinic.
Yeah, that's crazy. But if you're in the mindset that he is, that like their mental illness runs in the family. Yeah. Like why that's, you could kind of understand that point of view, I guess. Like do I want to bring will my kid go through it, and B, do I want to bring my kid into a family that has these problems? Yeah,
it's scary. I mean, it's a lot to think about. Yeah, but and another thing that I had in my notes just about their conversation in the car when the dad was explaining stuff, he says, "I never built you kids a treehouse. There was no treehouse," and I thought that was crazy because you definitely saw Luke in the treehouse more than once, and I think you saw him and Steven there together. So
you did.
All this time, and again, I don't know what to make of that, but if that was just like a shared dream or what, but it was like Steven was actively having the experiences just like everyone else. He just didn't realize it. Right. And so it also seemed like, though, that there wasn't any... It seemed like most of the other kids, except maybe Shirley, had like negative interactions. Like Luke had that ghost that came after him, and he was seeing those scary reflections when he and Nell were playing, and Nell was seeing the bent neck lady, and Theo, like she was picking up like scary stuff in the things that she would touch, but it didn't really seem like Steven had any of the negative experiences. So maybe that's why it was so much easier for him to ignore it, is because his all just seemed kind of unrelated. But with the one exception though, Steven found that old desk that he wanted to restore for his mom.
Right. And
he found that picture in it that Mrs. Dudley says was one of the members of the Hill family that was insane. Mm-hmm. And then he starts painting the dresser, and on the bottom is where you see that same black splatter pattern that was on Shirley's model
that's
home.
What it was.
And after it got in the footprints there. So, and then the mom has that freak out moment where she sees it and then punches it. So something was going on with that, but he just played that up to his mom's mental illness. But I think we're meant to think that there was something more going on with it.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I mean, they made a point in filming to like point out like him notice that. Yeah. But Katie and I were like, what the hell did he just look at? Like that doesn't. Yeah. Okay, that makes so much sense.
I thought that was really interesting. And in that scene, there was a ghost in the background. And so my question for you on this one is, do you think that she saw the ghost like reflected in the mirror and that's why she reacted? Or do you think it had something to do with like the desk itself, like some kind of vibe or feeling from the desk? And basically I'm getting at, do those black marks have significance, or was she just starting to be able to see all the ghosts that we've been able to see this whole time?
I think she probably saw. I would guess that she saw something, or was like possessed a little bit, you know, like kind of out of it. But I have no idea. Yeah, and we're running out of episodes for them to explain this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think there's definitely some stuff going on there, but tying Steven into the haunting stuff, I thought was a cool twist.
They had to do, for sure.
Yeah.
So this episode also has Shirley and Theo kind of battle it out, which I thought was, first I thought like, how did the situation with Kevin, that was his name, right?
Yeah,
go down. And you know, they start explaining, you know, Shirley's not wanting any part of it, and then when they're in the car together going to the house because they realize that's where Luke's going, you know, they start having like an argument. Seem like they're getting a little leeway, and then they start having like a really bad argument, and then all of a sudden the ghost pops out between them, which I assume was Nell, wasn't it?
Yes, it definitely was. And I thought that was such a good jump scare.
Yeah, it was absolutely a great jump scare. I literally jumped when it happened, but it was also like, is that one a warning that you're getting closer to the house, or was that Nell saying like, stop it, like you guys are fighting over something stupid? Yeah, which it actually ended up saving Shirley and Theo's relationship.
Oh yeah, I agree completely,
because you know, Theo was actually able to explain what was going on, and you know, they set you up to make it think that, you know, it was sexually involved because, you know, how Theo is, but it ended up not being the case, you know.
So her explanation was basically that she had touched Nell's corpse and then been like consumed by this empty feeling, and that it was just this like complete numbness and she couldn't do anything to get past it. And then she started freaking out about that being like, is that what it feels like to be dead? Is this what we're all destined for? Is just this eternal emptiness and wandering and loneliness? And then that explains, you know, the promiscuity and the heavy drinking and all that was her trying to get away from that, but it never worked. And then finally that night at the funeral, she was getting into a really, really, really bad place, and then she sees this beam of light and like runs towards it and grabs it, and that ended up being the husband, Kevin, for some reason, and that happened to be the moment when Shirley walked in. But then like the shame of Shirley thinking that there was something going on between them was like the first thing that she felt, and then that got her back to normal somehow. So that story seems a little weird to me, and I'll be interested to see how it plays out. Like, is that a link in the chain of evidence that will take us somewhere, or is that, I don't know. That one I haven't quite figured out. But I do think, to your point, that having just seen Nell's ghost, Shirley actually listened, as opposed to just dismissing it, which probably is what would have happened otherwise. So I do think that it was significant in that moment.
I want to know who the dude is that keeps showing up, like in Shirley's.
Yes,
you know, like he showed up like 3 or 4 times now. And it's like, I don't know if that's like an actual, every time he's like sitting down, he has a drink in his hand. It's like, is that an actual ghost, or are you just seeing this dude? Is this like some, like, you know, what is your interaction with him?
Yeah. And I wonder if like he's tied to the funeral home in the way that the other ghosts are tied to the house. And so maybe it's like anywhere that a Crane lives, the people that die stick around or something. I don't know, but yeah, that is a good point. Those have just been brief glimpses of him with no explanation whatsoever. So,
yeah.
So then I guess kind of the big closing scene. Luke gets to the house with the gas cans. The house lights up red from inside. He goes in and starts dumping the gas everywhere. But he's seeing the house like it is, like abandoned and old, not in a trance like Nell did. And then he pulls out his lighter and he tosses it, and just nothing happens.
Yeah, so like right before that, the dad's talking about how the family uses the family is an unfinished meal
to the house.
Yeah. And so that's when you realize that, okay, so it's maybe not the things of the house, that it maybe is the house, and it's like, especially like to Stephen, who wrote the book about the house and how he really shouldn't go back, and just all this stuff. So you have them talking about that stuff, and then all of a sudden you have Luke showing up at the house and doing what you just explained, lighting it. It's like, oh, okay,
yeah,
this is intense. Like, you can't just burn this house down.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if like maybe the dad tried in the past, which is why he just ended up just chaining it up and not doing anything with it.
Yeah. And so, yeah, he tosses that and nothing happens. Then he looks up and sees the mom at the top of the stairs, and she's holding out her arms to him. And then a red-headed ghost, who I don't think we've seen before,
I don't think
grabs him from behind.
Yeah.
And I wonder if she was one of the ones that we saw in the background as like Nell was dancing.
Yeah.
In one of the previous episodes. But we don't have any story at all on who that is or what her connection is to anything. So I thought that was really interesting. But my question for you on this one is, since we've seen in Nell's experience that going into the house, you're not necessarily seeing and experiencing reality as it is, do you think the house actually is on fire?
Oh, no, I don't. I think I'm basing mine off of two things.
Okay.
When Nell showed up to the house, it was like normal lights shining through, and the front light flashed on and off. When Luke showed up to the house, knowing that he had knowing that there's bad intentions, he was trying to burn the place down.
Yeah.
It glue, like the lights on the inside was red. Did you notice that?
Yes.
So like, I felt like that was the house saying like, let's do this, like, let's take this on. So I think that I don't know. I could see it flashing and he's in a burning house.
Yeah.
But I don't think that would be the end of the house. Like, I don't think that's the end of the battle. So yeah. I don't think it did.
Yeah.
Personally. But
yeah,
who knows with this story. It also made me wonder if like, the house like flooding, if there was something tied to that. So like in episode 7, they're thinking they have pipes busted, but like all the walls kind of move, and I don't know. There's something something going on with that.
Yeah, and thinking back on it now, I wonder if like those black spots that you saw underneath the desk and then on the model home were the same black spots that were on the walls. So I wonder if that was mold everywhere.
Yeah.
But I don't know for sure on that. So
yeah.
But anyway, my big.
Do you think it's on fire?
I don't know. I just thought that would be a good twist, but I don't think I actually think it. Two more episodes is a long time for a house to be on fire. So.
Exactly. That's a good point. Yeah.
But my big takeaway from this episode is that the dad basically knows exactly what's going on with the house.
Right.
And I'm super curious to see in the next 2 episodes what really went down that night and what's in the red room. And based on how it's played out over the last couple, I feel like it's building up to deliver on all of that. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, me too. I'm super excited, actually.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.
but I won't say it because I got respect.
Good.
For the viewers. Not you. I'll tell you after.
Someone's watching us?
Yeah. That's a good point. It's not like you don't make mistakes, you know. Sorry. Okay, so
my thought on it's like, I would just make friends. Because I don't have that many. And I'm so desperate for companionship at this point that if there was another sentient creature in the same dwelling, I would just become friends with them.
That's true.
They would
stick it on your upstairs neighbor.
Oh, no. They would just start avoiding me. It would be one of those things where, like, I'm overly friendly. And so then when we would pass each other in the hall, they would, like, fake a phone call in their, like, 1800s garb, you know. Yeah. And they'd be like, oh, sorry, good to see you, you know, wave, you know, give you the wave and leave. And eventually there would be no signs of haunting because they'd be like, oh, if I go in there, he's going to want to talk to me. And I don't care about the Oakland Raiders or early 2000s Canadian indie rock. This guy.
Oh, God, do I have to talk to him?
Yeah.
And also, it'd probably be because I would, like, threaten him. Because it's like, listen, he's not going to get another friend. Like, that's why you can't make friends, is because I friend him on Facebook and threaten the shit out of him.
You're just like,